All right, Peter Lewis, we're live. Welcome to the School of Fish.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Jonathan.
Uh, our guest today, as I mentioned, is Peter Lewis, Chairman and President of Wharton Equity Partners. Peter and I have gotten to know each other over the last few years. I consider him a mentor, friend, spiritual advisor. And Peter, maybe for everyone's benefit, if you could share your quick journey to where you're at today.
So Wharton Equity is a firm I founded over 35 years ago. Started out as a residential for-sale housing developer in the tri-state area. And over the 30 plus years have developed and bought most of the asset classes. The key thing to our firm over the decades has been that we try to think a little ahead of where everyone else is going and beat them to the punch, so that for example, we were very active in buying value add multifamily in the Southeast. In 2011, 12, we started buying. We were aggressive through those years, and then we went up selling around 2017, 18, and moved pretty aggressively into industrial real estate, where we are today. Again, we saw a big trend coming with e-commerce, and we felt that this asset class would be undergoing dramatic changes. Obviously, COVID expedited that. But even before COVID, we were convinced that this would be one of the great opportunities of my career. So I would categorize this as opportunistic, but in the macro sense. Obviously, within the strategy, you're always opportunistic, but we tend to make big bets on macro decisions, and kind of knocking on wood as we speak, but we've been pretty fortunate over the years to have been successful doing that.
And obviously the popularity within the industrial sector has accelerated over the last few years. And it sounds like you were going into industrial ahead of the curve. Mm-hmm. Is it normal to see kind of pockets developing within industrial when there's so much capital and developer owner interest in the space?
When you say pockets, what do you mean?
Meaning, like, when industrial is an overarching asset class, right? You're in the space. Maybe ask differently. What are the different components of industrial, either that you're participating in or that you see growth potential as the next component of it?
So industrial as a general category is undergoing enormous metamorphosis. As you know, traditionally, going way back, industrial was located primarily in heavy industrial cities like Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, usually in certain parts of town, maybe along waterways or on the water. And they were there to service and maybe ships coming in or manufacturing. So you still see a bunch of those in the cities, and we focus on some of those in infill locations. We'll talk about a couple of those if you want, John, along the way. But what's happening now, obviously, with the introduction of e-commerce and other factors, which I can discuss, industrial has become a much broader category of asset class. And this includes now, obviously, the mega warehouses at 1 million feet plus. And in some cases, Amazon has 3+ million square feet. And then you have the infill properties that were smaller in size, that are in some of the more densely populated locations that were another use at one point and now being utilized for distribution. And there's emerging classes within industrial, such as cold storage. I think you're going to see more and more around automation, which is going to open up a whole nother area of industrial to more rural areas where labor is not going to be as important as it might be in some other areas. You're going to see more and more the definition expanded, I mentioned, into quasi-life sciences or light manufacturing as we regroup after COVID and start thinking about how we handle our supply chain with respect to keeping enough goods on the shelves inside our warehouses. All these factors are coming into play. It's really a fascinating time. So you have these combination of elements, which, number one, the great groundswell is obviously e-commerce. But now layer on these recent events, COVID, the war, obviously what's going on in Europe. These are starting to continue to make the decision makers think about their supply chain and their future in a faster way. Let me add something else to that. Also, I think unionization is going to have a dramatic impact on the speed upon which automation takes over warehouses. It's ironic because here they are fighting for the benefits of the workers, and unfortunately, I think in the long run, it's going to be a losing strategy.
Right, and not to mention oil and gas prices, right?
Of course.
In terms of cost of shipping and logistics.
Which also on its own will probably continue to push faster electric vehicles, which are on their way anyhow.
I actually saw a YouTube video the other day of a police officer, traffic cop, pulling over an electric, the auto driving car, which I never thought about before. It's kind of, I'm sure Tesla or whoever's at the forefront of self-driving cars, not just electric cars, has a solution for that. But that was kind of funny. I would.
Future job could be that actually the patrolman's also a robot. So
right, two robots talking to each other. Right. That's just what we need. And obviously, your real estate career is extensive, both as a developer, as an owner, different categories, multiple decades, lots of stories of success, and I'm sure pain points. But one thing that I feel like that you and I always enjoyed chopping it up or discussing was innovation and technology. If you could speak kind of your history and or what you're doing today in terms of venture investing, and then also how do you see the innovation piece and your entry into that world servicing some of what you're doing in your real estate work?
Right. So I think getting back to the DNA of the firm, where we're always thinking about what's next and what's evolving, implicit in that is kind of an understanding of the forces that create these changes. So as we start to study what's driving them, out of that ideas start developing, which are sometimes not real estate related, but many times integrated into real estate. And I think bottom line is, at the end of the day, the way I like to think my firm, if I had one word, I think the firm would be curious. We're always curious as to where things are going. And I think you need to have that appetite in the world that we live in today, particularly as all types of assets are becoming more and more overbought. And I think that's due to two factors. One is obviously the amount of money that's floating around the system, but also one of the issues today is that everyone has the same data. So they're all focused in underwriting their models the same way. And what I think in the future, what's going to continue to happen is that real estate as a general class is going to their returns are going to go to some kind of mean, because everyone's running the same models, everyone has the same information. And ultimately, let's layer in the possibility of AI and machine learning. And I think everyone's going to derive the same returns. So the way to make money and the way that we've viewed our business is not only thinking about the real estate, but also what's going on inside these buildings, what are technologies that are around these buildings, or e-commerce at large. So that has actually over the years moved us into the venture business. So we are active investors, as you know, Jonathan, in a variety of companies. Some of them are directly related to real estate, like we're an investor in a company called Latch. We're an investor in a company that we recently put money into called Fabric, which is the automation of what's called micro fulfillment centers, which are facilities located right on top of major cities that are fully automated. And so we are energized by what we're seeing. I do think, and I'm not a genius in saying this probably, but the next 10 years will probably be the greatest period of innovation the world has ever seen. And again, we are at the dawn of what artificial intelligence, for one, layered on top of that, maybe, computing power exponentially increasing, and all these kind of forces coming into play. There is such opportunity ahead that I can't even sleep at night. I'm so excited about it. And you would think in my place in life I should be going the other way, but unfortunately, or fortunately, I'm more excited than ever.
And to your word, I like the description of being a curious company. And as the leader of the company, I would assume that you are naturally a curious person. What do you kind of correlate that curiosity in Peter Lewis? Is that something that you always had dating back to your
Yeah,
youth in Long
you
Island,
know,
or
yeah, it's a good question. I wonder about that. I think part of that is due to maybe my upbringing, where my parents, my mother in particular, because she was really at home, used to just buy books on all sorts of crazy stuff. You know, from I love astronomy. My mother was an opera singer. I was a pianist as a young kid. I was an athlete, so oftentimes I get pulled out of practice to go for piano lessons, and I was made fun of. You know, I got over that, but I think being exposed to a variety of different tastes, if you will, as a youngster, started really spurring my interest. And then when I graduated business school and I worked on Wall Street for a while, I was in a group where our mandate was to think of new products. So we created and originated products for our distribution. It was a retail distribution shop. So it was E.F. Hutton, was the name of the firm, and I was an investment banker. And I was in a great group because we could originate any type of product. So we did movies with Disney. We did a movie called Down and Out in Beverly Hills, among others. We bought TV stations. We bought shopping centers. We did anything that made. We bought mortgage servicing rights. So I was the low man on the totem pole, helping assess these, and I just ate it up. You know, and you know, when you really at the end of the day, John, when you distill it down, it's all about revenues and expenses. You know, and understanding how those evolve and are protected, and the choices of how defensible they are. And but if you really just kind of think about what business is, at the end of the day, it's ultimately about making money. And what I've also found over the years, and the reason we've been able to be eclectic as we have been, is that you can figure out ways to buy talent or to get help on things you don't know, whether it's teaming up with someone else who has that expertise and maybe giving equity away, or just paying for that research and help. I have so many examples along the way that I've done that, which has enabled us to do it. But it starts first with a spark. And right now, for me, if you ask me kind of specifically what I'm most excited about, I would say I'm probably most excited about artificial intelligence. I mean, I love all sorts of stuff. I mean, there's a ton of things we're working on, but the capabilities that are going to come from artificial intelligence are, I think, will dwarf the impact actually of what the internet was. And it's a pretty audacious statement, but we are yet to really fully understand the impact of what's ahead.
Yeah, and it sounds like also your history in real estate development lends itself well to being passionate or understanding a venture. Just because if you're talking about revenue and expenses, there's some things compared to buying a stabilized piece of real estate where it's a
Right.
little bit easier to project. You have to be more imaginative in
Yeah.
terms of what is there today or what it could be, and ultimately how are you going to
Yeah.
execute.
Well, that leads to a good example, if that's where you were going.
Yeah.
But this is a perfect example of kind of pulling all these together. But let's say about 3 years ago now, I got to check exactly, but it wasn't that long ago. We were presented with an opportunity in South Philly that was a 280,000 square foot, really ugly looking warehouse that the local investors passed on. The primary reason is, first of all, South Philly is a tough area. It's changing, but particularly tough even then. The building had graffiti, it had leaky roofs, it had all the negatives. And the local guys just looked at that building and said, oh, this is really a terrible area. I was of a different opinion when I walked the building and I looked at the aerials, and I said, boy, this building is sitting on top of a population of 4 million people. It's right on top of the highways. It's right next to the airport. It's right next to the port, and there's no vacancy in the market. I said, if we could fix this baby up, this is a last mile distribution facility. And that was actually when last mile was still just starting to become a word. Today, everything's last mile. And so we had the foresight in retrospect, and also we were able to convince equity because we were pioneers on buying a property like this. And we went in and we did our job and completely gutted it and fixed it up, and we were able to secure Amazon to a 10-year lease at rents that were 50% of projections on top of it, so under 50% of the projections. So that was really interesting for us as a firm, because obviously our hunch was right, but also we just triangulated around the pieces here and said this has to be. So I really am, at the end of the day, a collection of thought that kind of galvanizes into an action, yes or no. And if it's a yes, I go. If it's a no, I don't. I don't dilly-dally too much. And when I find that I dilly-dally, sometimes I regret it, because I think ultimately I'm able, after 35 years as an investor, to fairly quickly synthesize the key points to make a decision. And so in that circumstance, we were correct. And we've gone on now, John, to a number of properties that follow that same pattern. Whether we're buying, we have a property under control right now in northern Rhode Island that hopefully, if we get approvals, it'll be about 1 million square foot building. Again, an area of Rhode Island is not a place that people typically think about as real estate players. But what I find is that folks generally are looking at things in the current tense, or even looking retrospectively. Most guys don't have the ability or the desire, or to look forward. And if you think about, let's say in this particular situation, looking forward, 45 minutes out of Boston, and to be able to get an approval for a project this size, in a world where it's getting harder and harder to get approvals, to me, it just felt like a no-brainer, irrespective of the fact that kind of historically Rhode Island is being considered, secondary citizen. So you got to kind of think past the kind of what everyone else is thinking, and try to put on your aggressive hat today, I think, and going forward to achieve outsized returns.
Right. No, and I would imagine being a curious person, being creative, in some ways being deliberate by speaking to a lot of people, sizing up what's going on, gives you the confidence or the conviction to ultimately make a decision, right? And you have the track record of making big bets, medium-sized bets, sometimes small bets, when all those pieces are woven together. Fair statement.
Yeah, it's a fair statement.
As your business therapist here, and knowing you pretty well.
Right. I mean, for me, I love this, because obviously making money is nice, but the best part of it of all is just knowing that your vision was right. That, and by the way, it's never ending. You're on to the next. So I don't really normally take stock of kind of looking at myself, saying, "Oh, look at that! I did all these things." I think about, okay, what else is next? So I think it's a mixed blessing, because maybe I should spend some more time thinking about that. But there's just too much going on right now.
And you mentioned before fabric as an investment you made on the venture side of your business, which is in supply chain, logistics, technology. Is that when you approach investing in venture or making investments that are non-real estate in this case, are you saying, okay, categorically, this is where I believe a trend is happening, and then you proactively go out and find the opportunity? Or has it more played out where the opportunity, because you're just out there, presents itself to you, and then you're like, wow, this is exactly what I was looking for?
I think it's a blend of that. I can't, because each deal is different. I think the key is being out there, and also, though, developing conviction around certain macro trends. So, for example, with respect to fabric, the need to get goods into people's hands within a couple of hours is only going to get worse and worse and worse. Or people are going to become more demanding. So when you think about it, one of the biggest inhibitants to that is labor, right? And so if you can automate the process of picking and packing and getting it into the hands of the delivery company, which ultimately will probably be some kind of electric autonomous vehicle. The world needs this. So, so Fabric is specifically geared and set up to deal with urban infill development. And so, to me, it was an obvious thing because we know so well what's going on with industrial.
Right. And you had said to me, to give you credit for terminology, I'm not going to say it unless you give me permission to, but you multiple years ago, pre-COVID, had said to me something that was even shorter travel distance than last mile. Is it okay to mention that terminology you used with me before?
Sure.
I think it was last block
Right.
logistics, which, and during COVID, you saw the evolution of those 15-minute delivery companies, right? I would imagine that is in the family of last block distribution that you were talking about a few years ago.
Yeah, these are actually called micro fulfillment centers.
Okay.
And all sorts of terminology thrown around here. I think you're going to see more and more repurposing of properties inside cities. So retail to industrial distribution. Again, it's going to depend upon the part of town and the political sentiments, because there's no zoning for this. One of the interesting problems we face today, and we're facing this, by the way, on properties we're trying to get approved, let's say in a suburban town, is that their code did not exist, or it was in existence prior to e-commerce. So they're not set up to really address this new world. And you need to understand, if you're going to be a developer, how that particular municipality wants to deal with this. Some places are really pushing back, and there was an article in the Wall Street Journal on Saturday regarding this, how there's tremendous anti-development sentiment that's arising around warehouse developments. So you need to really understand your audience, and because the code is ambiguous, it's not black and white, and part of that's going to be understanding political risk.
And who, again, I haven't heard too many people touch on the political landscape around industrial. Who do you see as the driving forces towards giving the input so that policies are adjusted to reflect the needs of not only the e-commerce and the manufacturing, the real estate groups, the local citizens? Who's kind of at the forefront of that stuff?
Yeah. So look, in Rhode Island, for example, the governor is behind the project. I want to be careful about saying it because it obviously has to go through a process. But let's say the state of Rhode Island is pro-business and pro-development in a smart way. So they're looking to help us there. Whereas there are other municipalities where the elected officials adamantly oppose because the neighbors or their voters are against it, even if the zoning probably allows it. And so then it's our job to kind of show them why it's not as bad as they think it is, and then also point to the additional revenues from taxes and all the other things that come along with it. It's an interesting evolving problem. Places like the Lehigh Valley are quickly shutting down new developments as complete areas overnight raise opposition groups through Facebook. It's like, you can print these things now and you can get 500 people in a matter of minutes. So understanding, and by the way, this now introduces how on the other side as a developer, how you manage social media. Technology is changing our business, not only in the obvious ways. Maybe we can build faster, use different materials, all that kind of stuff. But it's also changing in the ways of the new world we're in, and social media is one of them. And understanding the impact that social media has is, if you don't do it, then you're leaving a very deep blind spot in your your business.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a big believer in social selling. I do think there's a few companies that have sprouted up. There's, the social media platforms where there's the ability to shop off of what someone's talking about or promoting. But I do feel like we're in the first inning of social selling, and the impact of influencers today. What's an influencer of tomorrow, and how do they leverage their following to lead to transactions when customer acquisition costs off of the platform have gone through the roof with all the capital and new companies sprouting up. And whoever kind of figures that out off of the social media platform as a player in the space, I mean, it's a massive, massive business.
I agree with you.
Peter, one of the kind of central themes of this podcast series is really business development. As you know, that's where I'm spending a lot of my time. Looking back at your career and, you know, for many decades forward for you, what are just some business development takeaways that you practiced or believe made a difference in your career and business development at Wharton?
So this is a question I get asked a lot, and it's a really good question for the firm. We are a product, however you want to think about it, and how we frame ourselves in the public is crucial. Making sure that we have a real kind of definition of who we are and who we want to be perceived as is crucial. And one of the things I've always taught our staff is kindness is a central theme. Follow up, you know, being thoughtful. I really like to try to run a business around goodness. I won't tolerate people who work for me who don't have that as a basic part of their life, because that feeds. You get back multiples of that and as long as it's genuine too. So number one, I think just making sure that is the business development in an indirect way is who are you and how do people feel about you. The other thing is, which is really important for me, was making sure that we were constantly working on if it was, let's say we need equity in the future, or or if it was, I don't know, obviously if we need properties, but whatever it is, we would really work hard on making sure that we were out there earlier than we needed the equity, if you will. So constantly attending events, pushing to have lunches, talking to guys and women prior to the need, so that your name becomes part of their vocabulary. And also for us internally, you get past that first stage of courtship, and so you can move more quickly when you need the money and understanding. So constantly being in contact with the capital markets and the decision makers about what they're looking for is important too, because at the end of the day, obviously, you can't do deals unless you have money. And I think that again, as far as business development, continue outreach with our staff, particularly our acquisitions guys, to the brokerage community and the others who bring deals, and really making sure that we try to differentiate ourselves by being thoughtful. We do things as quid pro quos where we'll, let's say there's a tenant that's looking for space, we'll throw it over to guys who are leasing agents. We're not looking for a fee. You do that a lot too, John. And I think that kind of creating goodwill, genuine goodwill without having your hand out, ultimately, it pays back multiple times. I think oftentimes it's short-sighted to kind of seek an immediate reward when the real reward is over time.
Yeah, and I think to synthesize that last point, it's really a relationship is not transactional at the end of the day. It's the authenticity, it's listening. Even when we first met, the fact that I maybe asked you where you were originally from, and you said Long Island and Great Neck, and I asked you professionally how old you were, and that you played high school soccer with my uncle, which I had never met anyone that shared that experience. You were a fellow goalie, so that I think was a link between us, and even for your brand and networking, even in the namesake of your company being Wharton Equity Partners, the Wharton, UPenn Wharton community may be one of the strongest business networks in the world. And when you chose, when you went through the naming process for the company, was your vision that was a big identifying element of your life and it had to be in the name of your company? Did you view it as, this is a name that I know will corral interested parties and make us more professional in our appearance? What was the mindset in naming
Yeah.
company Wharton?
So I think it was the latter. It just consciously and subconsciously, the name kind of symbolizes superior knowledge, and let's say in business, and certain eliteness, whether it's warranted or not. And so that was the reason. It was just about creating the perception of who we were, more than like a complete devotion to the school, which I have. But now you have to remember too, this was 30 years ago, and this was almost at the dawn of URLs and .com and all that stuff. And so I was also able to grab that name and also have the URL, which is really important. So it's been incredible having that over the years. I'm proud of it too, because I love the school, and I've met so many people over the years, obviously maybe older or younger, that went there. And this is a conversation. My son, as you know, one of your former employees, went there, and that made it really exciting for me. So it was really fortunate that we were able to do it.
No, it's great. And as they say, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, because your son is an excellent reflection of the person that you are.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And he believed as much in what we were doing at the time as we thought he could be a good addition to the group. And I was actually recently thinking about people like Teddy and other associates we've had permanent and on a summer basis. And how do I facilitate, because I have longstanding relationships with a lot of these people, how do I kind of create a little bit of a club for all their benefit? Because I
think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
By the way,
we've actually done this. I've never told you. We did a former, one of my companies, former employee dinner in the city of like 10 to 15 people, which was amazing to like all come back and bring, as they say, bring the band back together. But the summer associate one would be a fun one.
I would do it, because summer associates are guys that are just starting to bloom, and you want to be thinking about John. And by the way, that goes hand in hand with business development, right? Which is we touched on before. It's thoughtful giving, genuine giving, creating a community of closeness and affection, those kind of things. We're in a world, and we're going to continue to be in a world that is fractionalized because of the availability of all sorts of information, and much of it biased one way or the other. And ultimately, I think people are lonely. I think people will miss genuine love and interaction. It used to be, before my time even, but going way back when, where families lived within 2 blocks of each other. Like the world was different, and I think that I think human nature ultimately wants that, and so I think that if you conduct yourself in that manner, you're going to connect to people on a really basic level. And I think it's going to be a winning combination.
And one final point is, when you mention AI and AI could play a part in bringing people together, but you still ultimately need human interaction to layer in over the top or alongside the AI, which may power saying, Peter and John, you guys should know each other, which LinkedIn, suggested contacts and all that, like we take for granted, but all the algorithms that are working to create that suggestion. And it is still amazing to me from a business development perspective, when I put the effort in to find someone or research someone and reach out and do it gracefully and do it without it being templatized, and then to never hear back and hear response like, I never check LinkedIn, I don't always look at my text messages. It's like, there is no excuse for that. If you want to be recognized in business as someone that's responsive and cares and all that, that's just not acceptable. And of course, I do the same thing. There's times when, we don't respond to inbound, but it is a shame when there's magic to be had and it just falls through the cracks by virtue of someone not paying attention to it. So
that's the way it is. You just got to be persistent and continue pushing. and that door, one of those doors will open. You know, and that's another thing I think over the years for me has been just unrelenting belief. If I believe in something, I don't stop until I get it. And you know, a lot of no's have been in my way many times.
Right.
And by the way, just in general, I think people more often than not, and this may be more about like mentors and friends and people, like generally speaking, really tend to think no more than yes, just because it's safer. And this is the defining point, I think, between a successful entrepreneur and someone who doesn't succeed.
Yeah.
And that is believing in what you believe
Yeah.
in, and
I
don't.
have a book I was looking for. I think it's Getting to Yes or something.
Right,
Right?
that's right. There is
Positivity.
absolutely. I mean, I don't.
Practical positivity.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean, I don't read tons
foolish
of books on that
positivity.
stuff. To me, it's
Yeah.
common sense. But now that my sons and others have shown me the books, and I've read them. This one was actually I had an audio book on the one you just mentioned. But
Yeah.
it seems so simple, but yet it's not done.
Right.
You know?
My high school yearbook quote was "Common sense is not so common." So that's how I was thinking
I like
going
that.
on 24 years ago.
That's good.
But Peter, thank you so much.
You're
As
welcome.
always, you know, the conversations are special
Yeah.
and extremely relevant, and it was nice that we had a chance to share it with others. So
Yeah,
thanks for being
my
here.
pleasure, John. Anytime, you're terrific, and
Thank
always
you.
wishing good health and good success.
All right. Happy holidays. Thanks, Peter.
You too.
Bye.